It is difficult to quarrel with this year's SG60 budget statement. It's been generous. There's something for almost everyone. That's why Prime Minister and Finance Minister had said this is a budget for all Singaporeans. But the budget statement is more than an announcement of the goodies dished out to citizens. It is also a statement setting out the government's plans to address the current concerns of citizens, to rally Singaporeans together, and it is a roadmap to chart the future direction for Singapore. So I support the budget statement. I agree with the proposals to help businesses plan for growth, the push to help our citizens upskill themselves, and the plans to prepare Singapore for the future, which is always changing. And I'm grateful that with a budget surplus, the government has decided to share more with its citizens, for example, by providing $3 billion in Medisave top-ups. So the global minimum tax rules, which more than 136 countries have joined, to establish a minimum corporate tax of 15%, this has caused uncertainty about tax revenue. It makes budgeting a lot more uncertain, especially with a new US government with uncertain government policies and quick to impose tariffs. Social expenditure will go up, and corporate and tax revenue may be uncertain. So in an uncertain global economy, I urge members of this House not to take tax revenue for granted. So allow me to make 3 comments for the Finance Minister's consideration. First is equitable treatment for all citizens regardless of housing type. So for the past many years, I have advocated for budget surpluses to be distributed in a manner that does not consider a citizen's housing type. In previous years, Finance Minister had always given GST vouchers, U-Save rebates, and SCC rebates to residents living in HDB flats only. Residents who live in private estates are left out. In July last year, several MPs and myself, we had asked the government why it did not provide climate vouchers to private estate residents, because energy efficiency should be practiced by every resident. I also recall my budget speech a few years ago, where I had urged the government to consider ways in which we can allow our retirees and middle-income Singaporeans to share or enjoy the growth of the country and to move together as a nation, regardless of where they stay. Thus, for this year's budget, I'm really pleased that the Finance Minister had heard our pleas. He had given climate vouchers to all households, including private properties. I'm also glad that the SG60 vouchers, SG60 Active SG and credit top-ups, and SG60 Culture Pass will be given to all Singaporeans regardless of housing types. Many of my residents who are retired or are in the lower middle income would certainly appreciate the government sharing the growth of the Singapore economy with them. Some of my residents who live in private estates and may be better off, they do not need such vouchers. However, I think it is important that the government signals that it acknowledges the efforts of all Singaporeans who have worked hard, paid taxes, and contributed to the growth of the country. So my hope is that Budget 2025 will mark a slight shift in the government's financial policy to recognize the efforts and contributions of all Singaporeans who have built up Singapore, regardless of their house type. Next, sir, if I can touch on cost of living. In a recent survey by Black Box Research, Sensing Singapore, a large number of citizens have expressed concern about rising cost of living and inflation. And whenever I speak to my residents, they too complain at the rising cost of consumer products each time they go to the market, to the supermarket, or to the hawker center. And this is despite the fact that over the past few years, government has been giving CDC vouchers and outright cash payout through the assurance package to the residents. The payouts from the assurance package did not seem to alleviate the concerns of Singaporeans about the rising or the increased cost of living. For residents at middle-income squeeze, they simply have to tighten their belts as they get much lesser help from the government schemes. In a recent CNA article, former newspaper editor Mr. Han Fok Kwang said, the problem is that handouts are at most band-aids that do not address the issue itself, which is the rising prices of things that people need. They will hence never be sufficient, especially if prices keep going up. So I think the government must review this concern, which is valid. How can the government do its part to manage cost of living? when I speak to businesses, they invariably raise two concerns of running a business: manpower costs and renter. I think it's time to consider whether we should review the need to allow more foreign workers in areas where Singaporeans clearly do not want to work in. So I urge the government, consider adjusting the foreign worker ratio for industries like cleaning, shipping, construction, and a service line. A cleaning contractor told me he is forced to look for a 60 or 70-year-old Singaporean senior citizens to work as citizens, and this is to allow his company the ratio to employ more foreigners. So reviewing the foreign worker ratio will enable businesses to keep their labour costs down. I also urge the government to adjust rental costs for businesses on JTC and HDB-owned industrial and commercial properties, and also to consider reducing rental costs for hawker stores. And I hope that these issues are not sacred cows that cannot be reviewed. So early this year, our local banks have announced increased profits for the year. While I'm happy for the banks, happy for the shareholders, I do urge MAS to consider whether borrowing costs for businesses can be reduced. Excessive profits for banks may simply mean that some organization down the chain may be paying a higher price for these financial products. So finally, the large family scheme. I truly appreciate what the government is doing or intending to do by providing more financial support to couples with more children. Indeed, it will ease some of the concerns of the couples because of better financial support. However, if this scheme is intended to encourage couples to have more children, I think the government must go back to the drawing board to ask why are many couples not even having children. The Catholic Pope Francis has also urged couples to raise children and build families and not just keep pets. So is the reluctance of having more children due to a lifestyle preference? Or is it because many couples do not want their children to be stressed due to the education system? Or is it due to work stress that makes it difficult for couples to plan for children? I personally think that Singaporeans lead too stressful a life. We need to reset our definition of what is success in life. Many of us work long hours with reduced family time. Even in Parliament, sir, our clerks, our other staff work such long hours because MPs debate long hours, spend time debating bills until late in the evening and sometimes late at night. So I've on many occasions received emails from ministers late in the middle of the night. So if the entire civil service were to follow the lead of their ministers, then sadly all of us will have a stressful life. And we know the reason why many couples feel burnout. So I urge the government, please review this culture of working long and stressful hours. When I visit Australia or the European countries, I see many people out there enjoying the weather and perks from 5 p.m. onwards. Will a better lifestyle allow us to consider a bigger family? So I don't have the answer, but I think there's scope to carry out a thorough study if we want our TFR to improve. So in closing, let me thank the Finance Minister for his budget statement. I repeat my support for Budget 2025.